What do you do when you lose everything in a single week? Your business, your marriage, your identity. I didn't plan to disappear into the forest. But betrayal doesn't knock gently. It kicks the door in and laughs while your world burns. I wasn't always a man who lived in the woods. Once, I was Devin Walker, 35, a senior software architect, co-founder of a mid-size cybersecurity firm in Seattle, husband to a bright and beautiful woman named Rachel. I thought I had it all figured out. Maybe that's the problem with comfort, it makes you deaf to danger. It started with a missed lunch. Rachel and I had been together since our late 20s. She was charming, empathetic, the kind of woman who made rooms quieter just by walking into them. We met at a networking event for tech entrepreneurs. She ran HR for a recruiting startup. I'd been working 70-hour weeks building the company with Ethan, my business partner and best friend since college. That lunch was just a blip. Ethan and I are going over some onboarding projections, she'd said with her usual casual smile. You'd be bored out of your mind. What she didn't say. That they were at a boutique hotel downtown. That she never brought her laptop. That she didn't come home until after midnight. The signs were always there in hindsight. The prolonged glances during meetings, the way Ethan started brushing off my ideas during investor calls. I chalked it up to stress. Growing a company will make anyone cranky. I was wrong. They weren't stressed. They were scheming. A week later, I walked into a meeting expecting to sign off on our Series B funding. Instead, I got served with papers. Ethan had quietly rewritten our bylaws. Rachel, who owned a silent share of the business for tax purposes, had sided with him. They forced me out. I lost everything in 48 hours, my company, my marriage, my name. It was the betrayal that gutted me, not just that they conspired, but that they looked me in the eye while doing it. Ethan said it was just business. Rachel didn't even speak. I didn't punch him. I didn't scream. I walked out. The next morning, I drove. I didn't pack anything but a few clothes and my old camping gear. I headed east, into the Cascades, where I'd gone as a teenager on hiking trips. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't leave a note. I found a cabin listed on a quiet forum for outdoor survivalists, owned by an old man named Clarence who was looking for someone to help with the place. He didn't ask questions. Just handed me the keys to the wood shed and told me to chop like I meant it. It's funny what silence does to a man. The first few nights I didn't sleep much. I kept hearing Rachel's laughter in the back of my mind, the way Ethan clapped me on the back during our last project launch. I thought I'd lost my mind. Maybe I did, for a bit. But there was something healing in the work. Clearing brush. Fixing broken fencing. Carrying buckets of water when the pipes froze. Clarence didn't speak much, just gave quiet nods and made damn good venison stew. He didn't treat me like a broken man, which made it easier to stop feeling like one. Winter came early that year. The kind of cold that makes trees groan in their sleep. I woke up one morning to find something bloody and shivering on the porch, a lynx cub, barely a few weeks old, whimpering and half frozen. Its mother must have been killed. I wrapped it in a flannel shirt and held it by the stove for hours. Clarence just watched me from his rocker and said, "Forrest sends what you need, if you're quiet enough to hear it." He named her Tasha. Tasha the lynx cub was nothing but skin and bones when I found her. At first, she couldn't even stand. She'd try to hiss, tiny, pathetic puffs of defiance, but all it did was make Clarence chuckle. We fed her goat's milk and boiled chicken, and I spent hours each day keeping her warm and safe. She grew stronger. Bolder. Started following me around like a shadow stitched to my heel. She gave me something to care about again, something that didn't ask questions or remind me of what I'd lost. Her slow recovery felt like mine. It was around that time Clarence's granddaughter came to visit. Her name was Lily. 27. Light brown hair braided down her back, freckles like brushstrokes across her nose, and eyes that didn't miss a thing. She was beautiful in a quiet, almost stubborn way, like she wasn't trying to impress anyone. She'd worked at a ski resort 2 towns over as a logistics coordinator, until the accident. She arrived with a limp and a duffel bag, hobbling from the old pickup with a forced smile. "Grandpa said you're his new woodsman," she said as she offered me her hand. "Name's Lily. Don't worry, I'm not here to disturb your hermit routine." She was sarcastic, sharp, and tired. It took me a week to get the full story. 6 months earlier, she'd been caught in an avalanche at the ski resort during a freak storm. The rescue took 2 hours, and by then, her left leg had been crushed under a snowmobile. Multiple surgeries, nerve damage, and rehab had followed. Her boyfriend, Eli, a trust fund type from Denver, vanished the moment things got hard. No note. No visits. Just silence. "You learn a lot about people when you can't walk," she told me one night as we sat by the fire, Tasha curled between us. "Turns out he liked me more when I wore heels than when I needed help getting off the toilet." That made me laugh. It was the first time I'd laughed in months. We got into a rhythm. She'd help Clarence with cooking and sorting supplies. I'd do the physical labor. When the snow let up, we'd take short walks through the woods, her with her cane, me keeping pace. Sometimes she talked about life before the injury. Sometimes she didn't. I never pushed. One afternoon, we hiked to a ridge Clarence had told me about. She was determined to see it, even if it took us 2 hours. At the top, with the whole valley spread beneath us, she looked out and said quietly, "I thought I'd never be on a mountain again." I didn't know what to say, so I just stood there next to her, watching the wind move through the trees below. The next morning, we found Tasha pawing at something in the snow near the western trail. I thought it was a branch at first, but the shape was wrong. It was metal. Twisted, scorched, half buried beneath a drift. A rotor blade. We dug for hours. Found part of a door. Then the tail number. It was a helicopter, looked like it had gone down months ago. Most of it was mangled, buried deep in a ravine. We reported it immediately. A few days later, forest rangers and state authorities swarmed the area. Inside the wreckage, they found 3 bodies. And something else. Gold. Bar after bar of it. Smuggled, likely. Untraceable. Hidden in floor panels. It made national news for a hot second, a mysterious crash, no flight plan, no communication logs. But what made my blood run cold was what else they found in the debris. A passport. Water-stained, singed around the edges. Name, Elijah R. Montgomery. Lily's ex. The news about the helicopter crash spread fast. It was on the local stations by evening and picked up by national outlets by the next day. The story was full of wild speculation, drug trafficking, a botched robbery, even whispers of private military contracts gone rogue. But to me, none of it felt real until Lily saw the photo. It was blurry, taken from a distance, but the name on the passport was unmistakable. Elijah Montgomery. Her ex. Her ghost. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She stared at the screen like she was trying to see through it. "I knew he was shady," she said flatly, her voice steady. "But gold smuggling? He told me he was in software sales." There was a long pause. We were sitting at the kitchen table, Tasha asleep near the fireplace, snow piling up against the windows. Then she said, "At least now I know why he left. And why he never came back." The state launched an investigation, of course. The crash was ruled accidental, but everything else was murky. No flight plan. No emergency beacon. The gold, over $2 million worth, was taken into custody. Most of it would remain in evidence for years, locked in legal battles and jurisdictional turf wars. But there's a strange thing in Washington state law. If a civilian discovers a wreck containing unclaimed valuables and reports it, they're entitled to a government finder's reward. It took months of paperwork, waiting, and legal back and forth. But eventually, a check arrived in my name. $186,000. Clarence just nodded when I showed it to him. "Forest pays its debts," he said. I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. Lily hadn't said anything, but I knew her surgeries weren't done. The limp was getting worse. She was in pain more often, hiding it less. Her insurance had maxed out. Her job was long gone. She had quietly started applying for disability, though it killed her pride. I paid for it all. The next 3 surgeries, the titanium brace, the extended rehab in Spokane with one of the best neuroorthopedic specialists in the region. She protested, of course. I didn't let her finish the sentence. "You're not a charity case," I said. "You're my person. You got me walking again long before any of this." She was gone for 2 months. We talked every day. Sometimes it was light-hearted, updates on Tasha, what Clarence was up to, mostly fixing things that didn't need fixing. Other times it was heavy. How scared she was. How much pain lingered even after healing. But there was something else in her voice now, hope. When she returned, she didn't just walk, she danced. Not literally. Not yet. But there was a lightness in her step I hadn't seen before. A freedom. Her eyes sparkled when she told me she'd been cleared for hiking by spring. "Might even try skiing again someday," she said, only half joking. We celebrated with hot cider and a ridiculous cake Clarence somehow managed to bake. Lily lit a single candle and said, "To second chances." I watched her blow it out, and I swear, for the first time in years, I felt like I had one too. The cabin had become home by then. Not just shelter. Not just escape. Home. It creaked when the wind blew and smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. Tasha, now nearly full-grown, roamed the forest but always returned before nightfall. Lily moved like the terrain belonged to her again, strong, steady, determined. Her limp was almost gone, and with it, the weight that had once sat so heavily in her voice. Clarence watched us with a quiet satisfaction. One morning, over black coffee and fried potatoes, he cleared his throat and said, "I'm thinking of heading south this winter. My sister in Arizona's been asking for years." We looked at him, stunned. He hadn't left that cabin in over a decade. "What about the place?" I asked. He just grinned. "It'll still be here. Besides, I've got you two now." He left a week later, handing me a ring of old brass keys and a scribbled map of the property. "Forest watches over those who don't run from it," he said before driving off in his rusted Ford. With Clarence gone, the silence changed. It wasn't lonely, it was spacious. It made room for something else to grow. Lily and I started making plans. It began with idle talk. What if we stayed, built something of our own? Maybe a new cabin. A garden. Space for guests. She wanted to teach wilderness therapy. I was sketching out blueprints for a remote IT consultancy that could run from satellite broadband. Tech and trees, she called it. Spring came early that year, and we started building. Not just ideas. Real things. We cleared a plot a few miles down the ridge. Hauled lumber in a borrowed trailer. Laid foundation with our own hands. She planted wildflowers along the slope. I carved our initials into the first beam. It was slow. Exhausting. But the kind of tired that feels like progress, not loss. We told ourselves it was just for the summer. By the time the walls were up and the roof sealed tight, it was fall. By the time we had a front door and a wood stove, it was winter again. And by then, she was pregnant. It wasn't dramatic. No teary revelations. Just a quiet moment one morning when she came in from feeding Tasha and said, "I think we're going to need a nursery." I didn't speak for a second. Then I walked across the room, cupped her face in my hands, and whispered, "Are you sure?" She nodded. I've never been more sure. The forest outside was blanketed in fresh snow. Inside, our home glowed with warmth. And in that moment, I knew. My past hadn't been erased. But it had finally stopped chasing me. The first snow of that winter came hard and fast. By December, the cabin was sealed tight, firewood was stacked, and Lily's belly was round beneath her wool sweaters. Tasha stayed closer to home now, protective, almost maternal. She slept near Lily's side every night, her ears twitching at every gust of wind or snap of a distant branch. We'd never felt safer. Until the state called again. The crash site, the one where they found Elijah's body, was scheduled for permanent cleanup. With the ground thawing in lower elevations, forensic teams wanted one last sweep before the spring melt. Since I had reported it, they asked me to return to walk them through the terrain. I agreed. Lily offered to come, but I said no. "You've already carried enough of him," I told her. "Let me handle what's left." The hike to the site was slower this time. The snow had melted into thick patches of mud, the kind that clings to your boots and makes every step feel like a memory dragging at your heels. When I reached the ridge, the team was already there, tents pitched, markers staked, lights strung up like a crime scene waiting for its verdict. They found more. Not bodies. Not gold. But bones. Buried deeper beneath the cockpit, compacted under the wreckage. At least 2 additional sets, decomposed beyond recognition. No IDs. No dental records. Just shallow graves in frozen soil. They weren't passengers. They were buried. Intentionally. That changed everything. The story unraveled over the next month. Elijah hadn't just been a coward who ran when Lily got hurt. He had been a runner, literally. Tied to a money laundering ring that moved untraceable gold across borders using privately chartered flights. The crash hadn't been an accident. The pilot was shot mid-air. One of the passengers turned on the others. They all went down. And those extra bodies? No one would say it officially, but the theory was chilling. Elijah had used the forest before. To hide things. To get rid of people. The state sealed the case. Too cold. Too fragmented. But Lily deserved to know. When I told her, she didn't cry. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and said, "Then I was lucky." Lucky? I echoed, stunned. She opened her eyes and looked straight into mine. Lucky he left. Lucky the avalanche happened. Lucky I got broken, so I could build something real. We marked the crash site together a week later. Just the 2 of us, a wooden cross, and a small plaque that read, "For the dead, known and unknown. May the forest keep you better than men ever did." We stood in silence. Snow fell lightly. And when we turned back toward home, I didn't feel haunted. I felt free. Spring came gently, like it didn't want to wake us too fast. The snow melted in streaks, sliding off the roof in soft thuds. Lily was nearly full term, her hands constantly resting on the curve of her belly like she was already cradling someone who just stepped into the world. We spent our days finishing what we'd started, trimming the nursery walls, setting up a small greenhouse, building the second bedroom into a space for when Clarence visited again. He'd promised he'd be back by summer. Tasha stayed close, circling the property like she understood a change was coming. On the first warm Sunday in April, we held a celebration. Not a shower. Not a party. A blessing. We invited the few people we'd grown close to, Clarence's old friend Meredith from the next ridge over, a forest ranger named Cole who had helped with the crash site, and a couple from town who ran the supply store and never once asked why I vanished for a year. We ate wild game stew and apple pie. Lily wore a green dress and braided her hair with little purple flowers that were just starting to bloom near the stream. At sunset, I took her hand, walked her to the ridge where we first stood together, and told her the thing I'd been carrying for months. "I want to give him your father's name." She turned sharply. Her eyes filled almost instantly. "Elijah?" she whispered. "No," I said gently. "His real father. The one who raised you. Clarence." The silence that followed was so full it could have burst. She nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. "Clarence would like that." We placed the same kind of plaque we had used for the crash site, carved from oak, burned with initials. C.T., for love that asks nothing but presents. We didn't tell him. We just waited. Clarence returned a week before Lily went into labor, grumbling about Arizona's heat and calling every child under 10 a loud-footed goblin. But when Lily took his hand and told him the baby's middle name, his face crumpled in a way I had never seen. He didn't say anything. Just kissed her forehead and sat on the porch for 2 hours without speaking. The night our son was born, the forest was loud, owls calling, coyotes howling in the distance, branches cracking with spring wind. But inside our cabin, it was still. Sacred. He arrived fast. No complications. No hospital lights or cold machines. Just Lily, me, Clarence nearby if needed, and Tasha curled at the foot of the bed like a sentinel of old gods. We named him Miles Clarence Walker. 8 pounds. Soft hair. Quiet eyes. When I held him for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt since long before the betrayal. Wholeness. Not the kind you earn. Not the kind you build from anger or loss. The kind you grow into. Like roots. Like forest. We didn't go back to the city. Not even once. Not when friends reached out with job offers, or when former investors tried to reconnect after hearing about the gold. The old life was behind me like a burned bridge I never wanted to rebuild. Instead, we built here. Our home now had a name, Miles Hollow, carved on a cedar sign near the path that led from Clarence's cabin down to ours. It wasn't much to outsiders. 2 cabins. A woodshed. A greenhouse. A stone path lined with moss and pine. But for us, it was everything. Miles grew fast. He had Lily's laugh and my eyes. He learned to walk early, barefoot and wobbly in the garden, always with a hand on Tasha's fur for balance. She was enormous now, lean and silent, a true creature of the forest. Yet she was gentle with him, like she remembered the cold porch and the warmth he was born into. Clarence took to calling her the forest nanny. On Miles' first birthday, we hiked as a family to the crash site. The brush had grown back. The official cleanup team had long since left, and the trail was mostly overgrown again. But we knew where it was. I carried Miles on my back, and Lily walked beside me, one hand in mine, the other resting on her heart. At the top of the ridge, we had a new monument ready. We'd carved it together from a slab of granite we hauled piece by piece last summer. No names this time. Just a simple inscription. Let the forest remember, even when we forget. We placed it beside the wooden cross, set wildflowers around it, and stood in silence. Not mourning. Just remembering. Before we left, Miles reached out a chubby hand and placed a pine cone on the stone. No one taught him that. He just knew. We walked home with the wind at our backs. That night, as the stars bloomed above us and the fireplace crackled low, Lily rested her head on my shoulder and said, "I think we're ready for more." "More what?" I teased, though I already knew. She smiled, then whispered, "Family." And I knew she didn't just mean more children. She meant the kind you build with intention. Friends. Strangers turned kin. People who needed a place like this. A refuge. A second beginning. Tasha purred low beside the cradle. Miles slept, peaceful and warm. Outside, the forest was alive, but not with fear, not with ghosts. With promise.